You ever wonder how a letter that's, 2,000 years old could have anything to say about the crises we're dealing with right now? Well, we're about to find out. In this explainer, we are diving deep into one of the most direct, intense, and, believe it or not, super relevant letters ever written. The Apostle Paul's first letter to a church that was in absolute chaos. Let's get into it. Okay, so picture this. You've got this booming, cosmopolitan port city. It's famous for its money, its pagan culture, and, frankly, its moral chaos. Now, in the middle of all that, imagine a tiny, brand new community trying to build something totally different. And, well, they're failing, badly. That was the scene in ancient Corinth. The stakes? Yeah, they could not have been higher. All right, so to really get this letter, we first have to understand the two main players in this drama, the guy who wrote it and the city he was writing to. And man, what a contrast. On one side, you've got Paul, an apostle, and he's trying to shepherd this new movement. On the other side, you've got Corinth, a place that was legendary for its wild, anything-goes vibe. So Paul isn't just sending a quick hello. No, he's basically performing emergency surgery from a distance on a community that had started to look a lot like the chaotic city right outside its doors. And what an emergency it was. See, Paul had gotten word that the church in Corinth was just coming apart at the seams. So let's take a look at the actual problems that were tearing this community to pieces. I mean, just look at this list. It's staggering. This wasn't just one little issue. It was a complete meltdown. You had people forming cliques around different leaders, blatant sexual immorality, and get this, believers were actually suing each other in public court. They were fighting over food, using their spiritual gifts to show off, and treating their most sacred meal like a free-for-all. It was an absolute mess. And the root of all this chaos? It was this thing called factionalism. You had people saying, "Oh, I follow Paul," while others said, "Well, I follow Apollos," who was another teacher. They were basically creating fan clubs for human leaders and totally missing the whole point of being united under one banner. This division, this was the core infection that let all the other problems just fester and grow. And this just shows you how deep the cracks really were. These weren't just friendly disagreements over ideas. Nope. Things got so personal and so bitter that church members were literally dragging their own brothers and sisters in front of pagan judges to settle their fights. Any sense of internal unity was completely gone. So you're Paul, you get this laundry list of disasters. What do? Well, he doesn't just fire back a new set of rules. Instead, he goes way deeper. He offers a real cure for the chaos by reminding them of the core principles, the entire framework they had completely forgotten. It's a fair question, right? When a whole community is this broken in so many different ways, where do you even start? Do you just tackle each problem one by one? Paul's strategy here was just brilliant. He knew that just telling them, "Don't do that," wasn't going to fix the real issue deep down. New rules would just be like putting a Band-Aid on a massive wound. Exactly. He knew that if he could just get them to recenter their whole way of thinking around three foundational truths, all those specific problems would start to take care of themselves. So here they are. These were Paul's core solutions. For every single problem, the divisions, the pride, the lawsuits, the immorality, he brings it all back to one of these three big ideas. You're dividing the church. Remember, you're supposed to be unified. You're acting selfishly. Let me remind you what real self-giving love actually looks like. You're living only for today. Whoa, hang on. Remember that the resurrection changes everything. This, of course, is from the famous love chapter. And Paul here defines love not as some vague feeling, but as a series of choices, of actions. And think about it. Every single thing he lists, patience, kindness, not being proud, it was the exact opposite of the arrogant, selfish behavior that was ripping their church apart. This wasn't just pretty poetry. It was a direct surgical correction. And then he hits them with the biggest idea of all, the resurrection. In what we call the resurrection chapter, he just lays out the logic, step by step. He basically argues that the entire Christian hope hangs on this one event. If the resurrection is real, he says, then that means there's a future life, which means how you live this life matters profoundly. It was the ultimate perspective check. So, at the end of the day, all three of these big ideas pointed to this one simple goal. The whole point of their freedom, their gifts, their knowledge, it wasn't to win arguments or to make a name for themselves. It was to serve other people and build up the community. It was a radical call to turn away from me and focus on we.
Okay, so this brings us to the final and maybe most important question. This was a 2,000-year-old letter written to a chaotic city on the other side of the world. Why on earth should we care about it today?
Well, here's why. Because human nature really hasn't changed all that much. The struggles the Corinthians faced, I'm talking about divisions, ethical confusion, searching for purpose, the temptation to use our skills for our own glory, these are timeless. They are our struggles, just wearing modern clothes. And this makes the connection crystal clear. The factionalism over leaders in Corinth, it looks an awful lot like the intense political and social polarization we see everywhere today. Believers suing each other, it's the same spirit behind the bitter disputes that can tear apart any modern community, from a workplace to a family. And using your gifts for personal status instead of the common good? I mean, come on, that is a challenge every single one of us deals with. And that really brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. The problems are timeless, and Paul's solutions, making unity a priority, practicing real, selfless love, and living life with an eternal perspective, they are just as radical and just as challenging today as they were back then. It really makes you wonder, what parts of our own modern chaos could be healed if we actually took this ancient advice to heart?